everybody. Welcome to another video. My name's Corey J and I'll be your teacher today. Today's class is all about Surrealism. So what is Surrealism, you ask? Well, let's get into it. So Surrealism is my personal favorite style of artwork. It was a movement that started just after the First World War in Europe. And it's all about the surreal. So surreal is dreamlike, it's bizarre, it's unreal. It's basically something that isn't based in reality, as well as it focuses on imagination, dreams, and the subconscious mind. So when we think of surrealism, we think of types of artwork or types of creative mediums that are kind of mysterious, that really challenge the viewer to make up the story or kind of figure out the story of what is going on in the piece. Surrealism pieces are often described as thought-provoking and typically expressing a mysterious or hidden meaning for the viewer. Now, some famous surrealists are Salvador Dali, Frida Kahlo, as well as René Magritte. Okay, so because Surrealism is based around imagination, this class is going to focus more on theory and themes. So I've come up with 9 different themes that we can see throughout different Surrealist work, and we're going to use those to explore the topic of this art style. Now, because I paint Surrealism and I love Surrealism, I thought it would be cool to use my own works to show you the different themes and how they play out in artwork. So I'm going to throw up an image here of each of these different themes of one of my pieces, and we'll kind of depict it throughout my piece. All right, let's go. Okay, so here we go. So our 9 themes, we're going on the first one. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be looking at an iPad here, so you'll see me looking down, but I'm going to pop the image right up beside me here. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is juxtaposition. Okay, so juxtaposition is placing items together that don't normally go together to create contrast. So that's how it relates to Surrealism. So I thought we would look at my piece here, Don't Forget to Floss. Okay, so in this piece, we can see that there is a dinosaur, and the dinosaur is in the clouds, kind of like in the universe kind of background. There's stars, that kind of thing. So right there, we already have some juxtaposition of the dinosaur in a background that doesn't quite make sense. Typically, we see dinosaurs on the ground, roaming around, possibly in trees, but we don't normally see them in the universe. So there's juxtaposition there. There's also some juxtaposition between the dinosaur and the birds that are flying. The dinosaur is this big, massive, scary dude, and the birds are smaller and lighter and different colors. So there's juxtaposition there as well. And even in the floss, so the birds are stringing a little piece of floss here, and it's really tiny compared to the rest of the elements of the work. So that's one work that we can see juxtaposition in. We can also see juxtaposition in this piece here, the bonding bone. So in this piece, we see an octopus and a little French terry dog, and they're playing and soaring through the universe. So you can clearly see the juxtaposition between the octopus and the little dog. First of all, the octopus is very much out of his element. He is floating in space, as well as the French terry dog. And then also, you don't typically see dogs and octopuses together. So again, it creates this juxtaposition element in the work. We can also see juxtaposition in the environment once again, another starry, universal type atmosphere with the moon, and then octopi, normally they're underwater, and dogs are typically on ground. So there's a lot of different juxtaposing elements here that we can see throughout this work, and hopefully it'll help give you a better understanding of how to use juxtaposition in your work. Okay, so our next theme is transformation and metamorphosis. So transformation and metamorphosis kind of go hand in hand. It's basically showing something in the process of change. So we see this a lot in Surrealism. It's a very common theme. So let's check it out in this piece here. So transformation from sea to sky. So in this piece, you can see that there is an eagle, and the eagle is transforming into a walrus. Or is the walrus transforming into an eagle? But basically, there is a transformation happening here. And then we can also see the moon on one side and the sun on the other, and it's kind of like day and night happening with the lighter blues and then going into the darkness in the top. So you can see transformation of the day, transformation of the night, and then as well as you can see the transformation of the creatures. So you can see a metamorphosis happening where one thing changes to another. So this is another really strong theme in Surrealism. You can see through many works that the artist likes to show a process and evolution. So that's something else that you can portray in your Surrealist work. Okay, so our next theme is dislocation and displacement. So dislocation and displacement, placing items where they don't typically belong. Okay, so let's check it out in my piece Koi Ship Savior. So you can see here that the ship is kind of stuck in between two mountains, not on water, it's on land. And then as well, you can see that there is a koi fish in the sky, floating through the sky. So here we can see dislocation and displacement. So the ship typically is not stuck between two mountains. It's typically in the water. And the koi fish is typically also in the water and not in the sky. So this is another way that we can create kind of mystery or interest and express imagination in our work. We can also see dislocation and displacement in this piece here. It's called the Narwhal's Protection. In this piece, we can see kind of like a glass orb floating through some sort of background that's kind of dreamlike colors, but isn't quite clear. We can see bubbles as well as two small narwhals that are floating around the case. So here we can see a bunch of elements that don't typically go together that are all mixing together and all seem a little bit out of the place where we see them in reality. Now, while we still have this picture up, I'd like to talk about our next theme, which is symbolism. So symbolism is using an object to symbolize a theme or concept. So we can see that in this piece here that the rose seems very symbolic because it's being guarded. So it also kind of gives that imaginative aspect to the viewer. Now another piece that we can see symbolism is hope for treasure. So in this piece you have the skull, and then in the skull you have a rose coming up through. So this piece is about death and rebirth and looking for the treasures in life's lessons. And so the skull is very symbolic of the death and chapters ending, and then the rose is symbolic of new beginnings and rebirth. So this piece uses symbolism to get across its point of death, rebirth, and looking for life's treasures. Another piece that uses symbolism is this piece here. It's called the Healing Cycle. So here in this piece we can see that there's a heart with a scepter through it, and there's two doves that are coming. So in this piece, the heart represents hurt or pain or some type of trauma, and the doves represent the healing process, as well as the color palette used, you know, those lighter colors, those luminescence, the colors that have more white to them, that have more of a pale hue, more of a light hue, bringing light in. So here we can see the symbolism of the healing cycle. Now our next theme is levitation. So while we have this up here, I'll just talk about levitation. So levitation makes items look as though they are floating in midair. So we can see the heart here, it's just kind of floating in midair. There's nothing anchoring it to the bottom of the canvas or anchoring it to the bottom of the image. So this helps with imagination and creating mystery and curiosity. And it also helps with that dream-like feel of the painting. Now we can also see levitation in this piece, Window to the Soul. So in this piece, you can see there's a woman on the ground, and then there's a beam of light coming up, and then there's a fox. And the fox is kind of hanging out in mid-air at the top of the canvas, again, not being anchored to the ground. And so this also shows different aspects of levitation that might make the viewer feel like maybe, again, it might be a little more dreamlike or imaginative. We don't typically see foxes being suspended in the air in reality, at least not in my reality. So it really helps create this idea of surrealism. Okay, so again, while we have this up, we're going to talk about our next theme, which is scale. So we can see here that there is definitely a scale difference between the woman on the ground and the fox in the air. The fox is quite a bit larger than a typical fox would be to scale in terms of the fox to woman size ratio. So we can see that scale was played with in this piece. Another piece we can see scale played around with is my piece Humpback Harold. So in this piece, you can see the hands take up quite a bit of the canvas, and they are quite a bit larger than typical hands would be, especially in comparison to the humpback whales that are in front of them. So here I played with scale to get a message across that the whales need our help and we're coming to assist them. Okay, our next theme is transparency. So transparency, seeing through objects that are typically opaque. So transparency can help give a kind of imaginative feel to your work. Again, that surreal quality, because typically in life we don't see through objects, at least not the objects that are meant to be opaque. So we can see here, this is my piece called Flamingo Freedom, and it's about escaping the trialing thoughts of your mind. So here we have the woman here at the bottom, and then you can see near the top of the piece that I used transparency all throughout that second repeated image of the woman to kind of give a kind of imaginative mind-like feeling to the work. Now, we can also see it in this piece here, which is called Reflection of Myself. So there is a reflection of me, and in that reflection, I used transparency to make it look ghosted. So that's another way that we can add elements of surrealism to our work. Okay, our next theme is creating dream-like settings. So creating settings that don't appear as part of reality. So we can see in this piece here, it's called They Come to Me in My Dreams, that it's very dreamlike. The colors of the background mesh in with the foreground. We can see the jellyfish kind of floating, which adds to that dreamlike kind of state. And also the color palette makes it seem a little bit more dreamlike because it's not the colors that we see in reality. Another thing that's dreamlike about this piece is the woman's pose. She has her eyes closed and she looks like she's floating possibly in some water. So that also aids with that dreamlike feeling. So surrealism is based around imagination, and we want to create kind of a dreamlike sense in the work to kind of make the viewer start to use their imagination and start to wonder and ask questions about what's going on in the piece. Okay, now we got to our last theme, and our last theme is distortion. So distortion is warping the look of a single element or all elements of a particular subject. So we have this piece here, it's called Fifth Eye Lion, and in this piece you can see that I've elongated the lion's head and added in an extra set of eyeballs, as well as a fifth eye to the middle of his forehead. So here I've played around and distorted the way that the lion naturally looks. Now there's a lot of different ways that we can play with distortion in our work. We can elongate objects, we can distort part of the image so that we can't see it properly, we can bulge out different areas. So you just want to play with the way that the natural form is seen. Okay, so that's 9 themes that will help us to better create a surrealism work of art. Okay, so I wanted to give you a few tips on how you can create some of these themes. And the first tip is going to be about scale. So one way you can play with scale when you're trying to come up with your composition is to use a photo viewing program and tracing paper to scale images up and down and play with proportions. So you can use the tracing paper to trace over the image on the monitor, and you can start by making the image very small and trace over it then, and then make it a little bit bigger and trace over it again, and then make it even bigger and trace over it one last time. And then you'll have a couple different sizes of the same image that you can play with in your composition. So tracing paper is really helpful, as well as using that scaling tool on any photo viewer on a computer. Now my next tip is for creating transparency with acrylic paint. So a tip for creating transparency is using water or a mixing medium to dilute the paint, making it more transparent. So that's what I did in all my transparent pieces that I created different elements in my work. What I did was I took the paint and I diluted it with water, mixed it so it was nice and mixed together, and then I used that. The water adds a transparent or translucent quality to the paint and allows you to be able to see through it. I've also used a type of mixing medium to create that transparency to the paint. So anytime you add anything to paint, you're breaking down the opacity. So water works really well, but you can also use a form of mixing medium. And then one last tip I wanted to give you is about distortion. So there's a lot of different ways that we can use distortion or create distortion. One way is by using anamorphic grids. So basically you would have a subject and you would put a grid over the subject, and then when you were creating the grid on your paper to play with the subject or distort the subject, you would distort the grid and then draw the same item in that grid, in the distorted grid. By distorting the grid, you'll distort the image, and that'll give you some kind of interesting effects when you're trying to recreate that image. Now, keeping these 9 themes in mind, I want you to pick one of the following 3 prompts and create your own surrealist work of art. So the first one is create a new creature with the body parts of 3 different animals. That's prompt 1. Or you can choose prompt 2. Prompt 2 is explore technology and nature through one of the many themes. And prompt 3, use these principles to make a commentary on your last year. So these are the 3 prompts that I've come up with. Go ahead and choose one of them and create your own surreal piece of artwork. Now, if one of these themes didn't speak to you, you can definitely come up with something yourself, no problem. There are no rules here. I just wanted to give you some ideas to start to get your mind going. Okay, so that's it for today's class. I hope you learned a lot about surrealism and how to create a surrealist work of art, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at CoreyJ or leave an image for us all to check out, and I look forward to seeing you in the next class. Bye!